Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Danielle Park, editor of the popular blog Juggling Dynamite and president of Venable Park Investment Council Incorporated. Welcome back to the show, Danielle.
Thanks, Jim.
Danielle, the European Central Bank, have they run out of tricks in the bag to pull out here, seeing as how they're promoting negative interest rates already?
Well, that was the big news today, right? They've gone further deep into the negative hole with a policy rate of negative 0.5 from 0.4, where they'd sat since March of 2016. Mr. Draghi was going out with a bang. This is his last meeting before he was replaced by Christine Lagarde on November the 1st. And he, wanted to go out with a flourish, apparently. So he announced, even though his trick bag was there, he came up with a further negative, and also he offered some further QE. They'd been not doing QE for the past 8 months. They plan to restart on November 1st, some bond buying to the tune of 20 billion euros per month. And he says that they will keep that up for, quote, as long as necessary. So, of course, the thing is that he's already been doing this for many years, and the Eurozone has floundered. The economy has not recovered. Germany is at or about to go into recession, the most important economy arguably in that region. Italy's in tatters. I mean, it has been a farcical episode in terms of trying to add debt to solve a debt problem, and yet they have kept a straight face and talked very strongly as if they were having great effect. And he kept that up right to the end today. The reality is there's been a lot of opportunity now since this, since bond buying and negative rate policies, zero rate policies have been, going on in Japan since the late 1980s, but also in Europe they've been underway now for over a decade. And what we see is that there's been many studies that's given opportunity for many actual academic studies to be completed, which have proven that these negative rate policies are actually having an opposite effect. So in other words, they were hoping, the central bank's policy or objective is if they make, money basically free and, literally you're paid to borrow it, that banks will want to, if banks are penalized for keeping money on deposit by having to pay a negative rate or pay a rate to the bank, the central bank for keeping reserves there, that they will have an incentive to lend. The reality, in fact, is that banks don't lend unless they have viable people wanting to borrow with a probability of them being able to afford the loan and pay it back. And since we've got record debt already worldwide, and we've had flat wages, and we've got still very high unemployment in all across Europe, you really have not got this constant supply of new people who are qualifying for loans. And so they can do all this stuff at the front end and trying to jimmy rig the rate structure, but ultimately banks aren't lending because there's not a lot of demand in the economy for more debt. And that's because, not only capital investment is weak because businesses are not seeing great opportunity for growth. We've got overcapacity in the system from the credit bubble. And so there isn't a lot of reason to borrow and invest either for capital or even to just try and borrow more and consume more, which is what they keep hoping households will do. And so what they've determined, there was a bunch of studies done recently that just confirm that in fact what happens is that negative interest rates make people save more, right? Because they have it's got a very negative impact on savers and their ability to spend. So what they tend to do is spend less, save more, work longer. So it's not what they had hoped, in the sense they'd hoped they were driving people out into more risk and, that they would spend more. Of course, that's very counterproductive to the strength and stability of the overall economy. So now he's moving on, Mr. Draghi. He's moving on to whatever gig he has next. And the reality is that we've got a world economy that is highly encumbered with the highest debt levels ever, and, no good ideas about how to move this forward, except Mr. Draghi says, over to you guys, to the government, and him and his colleagues urge that fiscal responses, so this is government spending, taxation, these type of policies are essential. Someone even asked him about helicopter money in the press conference afterwards, and whether central banks should be dropping money into the pockets of regular households, and he said, I point out that if there's any kind of direct transmission of funds from governments to their constituents, it would have to be done under fiscal policy and nothing to do with monetary policy. So really this was just his way of saying, look, we've done all we can do, we'll give you a little bit more of the same, but it's not having the effect that anyone had hoped, of course, Mr. President Trump responds with a flurry of tweets saying we need more of that, which isn't working in the U.S. So this is the state of where we are today, where fiscal policy is really at a roadblock because we have such, extreme positions in government between the far right and the far left, and there's not enough middle ground or innovative ideas. There's too much status quo controlling the way in which money is being doled out in the economy. The policies that governments are funding, the incentives that are being given are all to status quo businesses primarily, and that has meant that we're not getting anywhere fast in terms of evolution or improvement. And so all that the politicians are thinking of is how do we get more debt into the system? How do we do the same old, same old? You saw that today even with, Prime Minister Trudeau's campaign launch, where he said, hey, guess what? We're going to, extend the first-time home buyers credit, which we announced earlier in the year. We're going to make it so that, for people with low incomes, they'll now be able to apply for this incentive on properties up to $800,000 in places like Vancouver, Victoria, the Greater Toronto area, where housing has become insanely unaffordable because of too much debt available, which allowed prices to climb, too much speculation. And so their idea is, how do we do more of that, right? But once people are that encumbered, which the population of Canada is, and certainly new home buyers trying to get into these markets at these insane price levels, is really just not moving the needle. They're really not helping. First of all, it doesn't help people to borrow 4 and 5 and 6 times their income. It just puts them farther and farther behind the 8 ball in terms of being able to accomplish their life goals. But also, they just aren't even with this additional incentive from the government, they're not able to reach, home prices which are averaging, $800,000 and $900,000, even condos which are averaging $500,000 and $600,000. This is all pretty unaffordable.
Well, Ross Kay, a real estate home buying expert that we talk to every week, said this government home incentive is really like you're giving the government a piece of your home, so they expect you to pay them $25,000, $50,000 by the time you pay off your mortgage. He said it's like taking out a 10.5% mortgage, I believe was the figure he used, something like that, when right now a mortgage is much, much cheaper than that, so it's not really making your home more affordable.
Well, first of all, when people talk about the government, I like to point out that's us taxpayers. That's the first thing. So if we're going to be incentivizing people to get into the property market, then I certainly think that taxpayers should be paid something for that service. Now, the thing about this incentive that is being offered to first-time home buyers, it is interest-free, so it's not accumulating. If they give you 10% or 5% to purchase your first home, the only demand is that when you go to sell the property, or 25 years, whichever comes first, you have to give back 10% of the market value, or whatever the proportion you borrowed from us taxpayers has to come back to us in the terms of the same percentage of the market value of the property. Now, theoretically, though, that could mean that the property has gone down in value as well, which no one ever thinks about. So it is possible taxpayers could lose funds on this if the value of the property went down in the holding period. But I certainly think that if we're going to be extending funds interest-free for 25 years potentially, we have to have something in it for taxpayers in terms of recouping some, return on that principal. So I actually think that the mechanism itself is not such a horrible idea. The problem is that they're doing it to, make people who are in households of under 120,000 in these very unaffordable areas, they're making them reach for shelter, which essentially they can't afford, is going to put, even if they can manage to keep the payments up, they're going to have a very, difficult life in trying to meet the other needs and any other savings goals, including retirement. And that's another thing that this, that they're incenting, they're saying to anyone that has RSPs who wants to buy their first time home, take up to $35,000 out of your retirement fund. But the reality is, that is an actual symbol for the fact that many Canadians today are not saving for retirement or their children's education in a meaningful way because they are strapped with this unaffordable housing. So really the thing we need is lower cost solutions, not how do we get people into the Ponzi-like pricing that we currently have.
We'll have more with Danielle Park right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Danielle Park. Danielle, what we've been talking about brings up the question, should you invest any extra money you have or should you pay off debt? What's the better deal for you?
So, it depends on the category. It depends on your income level to some extent. But if you have a relatively high taxable income, and you have, the ability to put money into an RSP or put money down on your mortgage, I have to look at the numbers in individual cases, but generally speaking, it can often make sense to put money into the RSP, get the tax deduction, and then use that tax deduction to pay down the mortgage. That's certainly a reasonable course in many cases. However, for people that are trying to save beyond that, and I come across this, fairly often, people have, a certain amount of funds that they are saving outside of a registered account where they didn't get a tax deduction for putting the funds aside. It's just sitting there. In most cases, they would be better off to pay off their personal debt first before they try and do that saving outside of their house. And people say, well, then I'll never meet my retirement goals if I have to pay off my debt before I start saving outside of RSPs. And the reality is, well, you're never going to do it the way you're doing it anyway if you're constantly keeping a non-deductible debt. Once you look at the net return after tax of any gains you're going to make on non-tax sheltered money, it's going to pale in comparison to the, non-deductible cost of the interest you're paying on the other debt. So in almost all cases, again, one has to look at the facts, but in most cases, they are better off to repay the debt before they try and buy investment products. And we're talking about a financial industry that rarely tells people that, Jim. I realize that, our firm is one of the few who actually tells people that because unfortunately we are dealing with an industry that is paid to sell products, and so they don't want to be telling people to pay off debts if that means they don't have funds to buy their products. But at the end of the day, that is the client's best interest in most cases.
We'll have more with Danielle Park right after the break.
Aben Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Aben's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at abenresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Danielle Park. There's a new report that says gas plants and pipelines are not as good as renewables or unsustainable. What's in the report and what does it tell us?
No, so it's a report by the Rocky Mountain Institute, but there's been others like this. It's just pointing out that the pace at which the cost of renewable energy is coming down and the capacity of storage technology is increasing and price coming down, the speed at which that is happening means that the cost of building new gas-fired plants and pipelines here is going to be uneconomical. 90% of the proposed gas plants, for example, are going to be more expensive to run than to build new wind and solar programs with storage capacity. So what it really speaks to, again, and we've talked about this before, is this, battle against the status quo, which wants to keep funding and using government funds, indeed, to heavily subsidize the oil and gas industry and pipelines, which I understand people are used to that being a pillar of the economy. But the reality is that the other technology is advancing so quickly that it's going to be malinvestment when we keep, putting these, by the time these programs that are currently envisioned get rolled out, they're going to have proven to be malinvestment. Because the problem is that, for example, in pipelines and the products, the gas that goes through them, is a function of volume. So if the utilization of the pipeline falls, then the people, because other people are using different types of energy, because they've made huge strides in terms of less consumption, because they now have these, renewables with battery storage. When those things happen and there's less volume going through those pipelines, as an example, that means that the existing customers, the people who are still trying to use them, are going to see their average costs spike, and the reports suggest, they could increase by as much as 100 or 140% from current levels. So that's not going to be an economical system, and it's going to end up wasting the money invested, be bad for investors, be very negative for customers. So just throwing good money after bad. And there's been several, reports on specific, the Energy and Policy Institute did another one, explaining that, certain companies, like energy companies, and pipeline companies are trying to skew the information presently to make it look like, they're going to be more cost effective, but essentially we're already past the tipping point. So it's really in favor of, again, looking where the puck is going instead of trying to keep going with these systems like keeping housing prices going up even though they're unsustainable and shouldn't, or, keep plowing money into old technologies. It's really a waste of money in the long run. We have to look forward to where we're likely to be in 10 years from now.
Yeah, I look along the BC coast because of Vancouver Island. The tide along the coast here is completely variable, yet we're not using tidal power. There's a company in Vancouver called Blue Energy. They have tidal power plants in 33 countries. The only one they don't have one in is Canada. Why are we ignoring, seeing as how we have 3 different oceans bordering our nation, using more tidal power?
Well, everyone mocks these new technologies and saying, oh, they're just a drop in the bucket of what we need, and the backbone of the system is still based on these old fuels, which, that's fine. But if we have that mentality about everything that's new, nothing new would ever be adopted. So the reality is that all types of these energy systems are coming on stream, and they are all incrementally adding to the renewables bucket, and therefore making the investment in the old fuels less lucrative or less likely to pay off in the longer run. So it's a solution that includes all sorts of different new technologies and systems, and it's also a solution that requires a lot higher efficiency. I understand Michael Moore has a new movie out, which I have not yet seen, although people have been asking me, and I'm waiting to watch it as soon as I can. But I understand that it looked at the renewable energy systems and technologies and comes to the conclusion that, it's more about we have to reduce consumption, that them and of themselves are not going to solve what's binding in terms of the challenges facing energy and the clean air and environment and all this stuff. And I think that makes total sense. I mean, you can't expect to be energy pigs, to be wasteful, to continue to, throw away our funds towards things we don't have to waste them on if there's a lot of smarter things to be doing. And so I think, part of it is this mindset of, you go back to housing, just as an example. So we got, the credit bubble took us from an average square foot home of, 1,300 square feet in Canada to something like 3,500 square feet. That wasn't that people, necessarily needed more room, but that they could carry more room in terms of size because interest rates were low. Well, obviously that's not the most efficient shelter that one can have. Certainly if you're borrowing more money, and certainly if you're losing all the cash flow that you could then be directing towards other things, then obviously your shelter is less efficient at twice the size. But the same goes for the energy conundrum, right? So if you have, this much more in terms of housing that you have to heat and cool and maintain, the same goes. It's not a solution in itself. And I think that the opponents are making the point that, we can't factor in massive consumption for 10, 12, 14 billion people on Earth and expect that we're going to have enough resources to go around. And certainly I'm saying I agree with coming at it from, we have to look at ways to be more efficient for sure. But also, we have to embrace all this new stuff, which is, microprocessors, semiconductors, all this stuff that we've invented over the last 100 years has taken us to a place where we actually have optionality like we've never had before in human history. So, as we move forward, we have to really embrace the things that have come our way and make sure we use them to the full extent.
Danielle, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Hey, thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Danielle Park, editor of the popular blog Juggling Dynamite. If you have any questions for Danielle or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.